Welcome one and all to the examples focusing on writing the trig equations from a graph and matching the trig graphs with the correct multiple choice equation. At the top, I have given both the standard form of both sine and cosine, and underneath them, I give the general form of delta math focuses on for the standard form of the sine and cosine functions. So notice that the key difference between the two is that for our original standard form, we have the plus or minus h. That focuses on the phase and horizontal shift, whereas delta math doesn't really focus on that, and they give their own version, which takes that part out. They focus primarily on the A for the amplitude, the F for the frequency, which is our B, and C for the vertical shift or midline, which is our K. So it's important to note that before we get started on our first example. So here's our first example. Here we have given the graph. If you've done the previous assignments, notice that this is just now a culmination of everything where you're not given the information specifically, but you can get the information from the graph. So the first thing you always want to do is find the midline to the sine or cosine function. We'll identify that later. Here my midline is at 1. Okay, so my y equals 1. That's my midline. And that's the same as telling my graph moved up 1. As for my amplitude, I'm going to take this vertical red line, dashed line to see the difference between the midline to the max or to the min, and the distance is 2. So therefore my amplitude is 2. That's a crazy 2. Let's write a little bit normally. Okay, there we go. As for the period, again, we do need to find the length of one complete cycle. So what you typically want to do is start from the y-axis and mark that as our first key point, which is in the middle. Then it goes high up here. Then it goes mid here, low here, and mid back there. So this ends at pi over 2. So this is going to be my period. We can now use that period we just found to find the frequency, which is our b. And the formula for the frequency is 2 pi divided by the period. So here I'm going to get rid of that and instead paste what we just found it over here. Now, as you should remember, a number divided by a fraction is the same as multiplying with the second fraction flipped. So we're going to write 2 pi again like normal, but we're going to multiply it with the second fraction flipped, which is now 2 over pi. Just to make sure you're clear about it, the 2 pi can be rewritten as 2 pi over 1. Now if we multiply this back together, this is going to give us now 2 pi times 2, which is 4 pi on the top, and on the bottom we still have pi. If we reduce this though, pi divided by pi cancels out to be reduced to 1, so we're left with 4. So our period is 4. The last thing we want to identify is the pattern itself. We went from mid, then high, then mid, then low, then mid when we were trying to find our period. And because that's our pattern, that means we know for a fact that this is going to be our sine function. Okay? And I'm going to write that in black so we can differentiate the different parts of the graph. All right. Now, when we put it all together, our answer is in the form of an equation, so it is very important that you put it as y equals, okay? Do not forget the y equals. If you type in everything else after the y equals correctly, it's still going to be considered wrong because you are asked to find an equation. So here we go. Our amplitude is the first part, so 2. No, actually it's our sine function, goes here. Now what's inside our sine function, that goes inside the parentheses. So first thing is we establish our frequency is 4, so this is now 4. Followed up with x. Oh, come on, there we go. Try again. And then our midline is the last one, so that's going to be plus 1. So I ran out of space, but you should see that's pretty much our answer. Let me see if I can slide everything over. So y equals 2 sine. Oh, there we go, parentheses 4x. Oh, there's that x right here, and then the plus 1. There we go. And that's our answer to this specific problem. And you just do that with all the other examples. Again, it is important to identify the midline, amplitude, finding the period to get you the frequency, which is the b, and then last thing is identifying the pattern in the period so you know which is whether it's cosine versus sine. Here's our last example, which is the second section of the Delta Math assignment where you're given a graph and you have to match the equation given to you in the multiple choice. So it is important to note again that this is a little bit more amped up a little bit because the numbers are a bit bigger and they're all over the place. But again, nothing changes about how you do this. First, find the midline. So midline goes about right here, which is the y value of 120. So the midline is 120. My amplitude is the difference between the midline and the height. So I'll just put it here. It doesn't matter which one you pick because it will be the same. 120 to 140 is a difference of 20, so that's my amplitude. One complete cycle is here at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So therefore it ends at 4. My period is 4. If I put it into my formula, it's 2 pi divided by 4. And if I reduce this, this is now going to be pi over 2. So that is my frequency. The last thing is our pattern is from high, mid, low, mid, high, which is our cosine function. Okay? Again, it makes that U shape when we do one complete cycle. So going to our multiple choice answers, I can at least eliminate anything that's not cosine, so that would be it. And looking at our numbers, our amplitude is 20, so therefore I can eliminate that one. Our answer is this one, y equals 20 cosine pi over 2x plus 120. So even though we didn't necessarily have to find the frequency or the midline, it's still good to have everything so that it matches and you know exactly what you're finding. So there you have it. Those are the examples for both sections of this specific Delta Math assignment. Good luck on the rest of those examples.